Every once in a while, I think it's good to take a look at the people controlling the industry and wonder how we got here. Some would have you believe the industry's in trouble, that things are bad for everyone. You'll often hear after a failure how tough it is to meet expectations after a game made for modern audiences by a hostile dev team that hates gamers manages to flop to everyone's surprise. Naturally, they are silent about all the positives, the surge in AA and indie games, all the new studios bringing out masterpieces. Just this year, we got Stellar Blade, Wukong, Palworld, Helldivers 2, Unicorn Overlord, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, First Descendant, and Monster Hunter Wilds. Just the beta alone almost hit 500,000 concurrent players. A beta of all things. But AAA, at least if there's one place that is sucking as an industry, we can admit AAA studios are messing up everything they can. The exec running Microsoft, he's getting a good $80 million salary as he lays off $2,500 in Xbox gaming. Warcraft, meanwhile, brings out an anniversary Longboy mount for $90, just as the fans want. A single cosmetic in a game that costs more than an entire video game, and there's barely any notice. Now, why is it when Stellar Blade has an attractive female lead, journalists will rage for months, coming up with multiple attack angles to try and ruin the studio, calling the devs sexist and incels, all which are pure lies? They see this as a danger. This is something they need to cover at length. The threat of a female-centric game by an unknown foreign studio without microtransactions. Wukong, a highly diverse game from an unknown studio, also prompted journalists to spend almost a year lying about the studio, digging up decades-old posts from devs, trying to whip up a lynch mob to destroy the studio, all out of fear that this studio might make a fun game that gamers enjoy, which, by the way, they definitely succeeded at. 2,500 layoffs by an exec making $80 million a year. Several studios recently shut down right after they were purchased. Microsoft with $90 microtransactions after removing the object from being earnable in-game. Out-of-control exec bonuses, massive job loss, excessive in-game purchases that are only growing more and more, and there's barely any interest in it. But any reasonable person would say these are things that are a threat to the gaming industry, to our enjoyment of video games. Yet, while they won't talk much about this, they will do article after article and spend days on social media going after people who play video games instead. Who do they serve? Because it's quite clear that they aren't interested in talking about things that damage the gaming industry. Things which would have been the bulk of their topics a decade ago. How cheap were games journalists bought for? This is not a new thing, but this is the new norm. Just a few days ago, Ubisoft brought out an NFT game. Where was the rage from journalists? Why isn't that where their interest is right now? Why isn't that what's covering all aspects of social media from the journalism angle? This is something that they used to pretend they despised. This was one of those things that was like a corporate sin to even talk about bringing out NFTs, and yet they dropped an entire NFT game. Instead of covering corporate greed and NFTs, they let those slide into the shadows. Well, they instead go after games that commit the crime of being interesting to gamers. They instead go after gamers who are expressing disappointment in the massive corporations that they're supposed to hold in check. And their current focus is all on propping up Dragon Age the Veilguard for Electronic Arts. Did anyone think Activision, Ubisoft, and EA of all corporations would become journalist darlings? Especially after everything that's been revealed about what they were doing in the shadows just a few years ago. But just look at what happened this year. Games journalists have spent the year defending at all costs the corporations that only a few years ago they were hounding like dogs. Well, it's pretty clear the dogs have a new master now.